Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the crystalline doors of the Zarkak's High Council chamber, straightening her diplomatic uniform one final time. Behind her, Earth's first contact team shifted nervously, their breath fogging in the cold alien air. The massive structure of living crystal that housed the Zarkak's government loomed above them, its ever-shifting colors reflecting the three suns of this alien world. "Remember," she said to her team, "we're making history today. First official diplomatic contact with the Zarkak's empire. Let's show them humanity's best face." Dr. James Morrison, the team's xenobiologist, checked his tablet one last time. Their atmospheric mix is still within human tolerance, but only barely. The gravity's going to feel like we're wearing lead boots. "Small price to pay for peace," Sarah replied, squaring her shoulders. The doors began to part with a sound like wind chimes, revealing the vast chamber beyond. The Zarkak's High Council chamber was a marvel of bioengineering. Living crystal formations grew in precise geometric patterns, forming tiered seats where the alien councilors sat. The Zarkaks themselves were equally stunning. Tall, elegant beings with iridescent scales and multiple sets of arms, their bodies seeming to shift and flow like liquid mercury. High Councilor Vector, distinguishable by his elaborate crystal crown, rose to greet them. His translator crystal pulsed with each word. "Welcome, children of Earth. We are honored by your presence." Sarah stepped forward. Following the carefully choreographed protocol they'd established through months of remote communication. "The honor is ours, High Councilor. Earth extends its hand in friendship to the Zarkak's empire." Everything was going perfectly according to plan. Until it wasn't. The shot came from somewhere in the upper tiers, a beam of pure energy that struck Sarah squarely in the chest. The human delegation erupted in chaos as their ambassador collapsed. Security forces materialized from hidden alcoves, their weapon crystals humming with deadly intent. But then something happened that would change the course of both species forever. Sarah Chen laughed. The energy beam had burned through her uniform, leaving an angry red mark on her chest, but she pushed herself to her feet, much to the astonishment of every Zarkax in the chamber. "Is that how you greet all your guests?" she asked, brushing off her singed clothing. "Or am I special?" The chamber erupted in a cacophony of crystalline sounds as the Zarkak's counselors spoke all at once. High Councilor Vector's scales had shifted to a pale blue, a sign of shock they'd learned from their cultural briefings. "Impossible," he whispered, his translator crystal struggling to keep up with his rapid speech. "That weapon, it should have killed me." Sarah finished for him, still standing tall despite the pain. "You might want to check your cultural database again. Humans are notoriously hard to kill. We evolved on what you probably call a death world, high gravity, extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators, natural disasters. Getting shot." She smiled, though it was more of a grimace. "That's Tuesday for us." Dr. Morrison was already at her side with a medical scanner. "Ambassador, you have second-degree burns and minor tissue damage, but somehow the beam's energy was largely dispersed through your body's natural electrical field. It's fascinating, really. Our nervous system seems to have properties that—" "Not now, James," Sarah cut him off, keeping her eyes on Vector. "High Counselor, I believe we were about to discuss trade agreements. Unless you prefer to try shooting me again." The silence that followed was profound. Then, remarkably, Vector began to laugh, a sound like crystal wind chimes in a storm. "In 10,000 cycles of diplomatic relations," he said, his scales shifting to a deep purple of respect, "never have we encountered a species that could survive a counselor's weapon. The shot was not sanctioned, I assure you, but it has revealed something extraordinary." "What's that?" Sarah asked, accepting a pain reliever from Morrison, while maintaining her diplomatic composure. "That perhaps it was not we who should have been evaluating you for alliance worthiness, but you who should have been evaluating us." Vector descended from his elevated position, all four arms spread in a gesture of supplication. "Ambassador Chen, your species' resilience, may be exactly what our empire needs in these dark times. Sarah's diplomatic training kicked in, recognizing the shift in power dynamics. Dark times, High Counselor. I believe you've left some crucial information out of our previous communications. Indeed. Vector's scales rippled with colors of concern. We face an enemy that makes the weapon that struck you seem like a child's toy. An enemy that has already consumed 3 of our outer worlds. We sought allies among the stars, testing each species we encountered, but none survived even our basic weapons. Until now, Sarah finished, understanding dawning. She turned to her team, saw the same realization in their eyes. First contact had just become something far more complex than they'd anticipated. Until now, Vector agreed. Ambassador Chen, your survival here today may have changed everything. We need to talk, not as superior and inferior species, but as equals. There are things in the darkness between stars that hunger for both our peoples. Sarah straightened her burned uniform again, ignoring the pain. This was why she'd become a diplomat. For moments that could change the course of human history. Then let's talk, High Counselor. But first, I have one condition. Name it. Next time you want to test humanity's capabilities, she said with a wry smile, just ask. We're surprisingly accommodating when people are honest with us. Shoot us without warning, though. She gestured to her burned chest. We tend to take that personally. The chamber filled with the crystalline sound of Zarkak's laughter, and for the first time since the shot was fired, Sarah felt real hope for the future. Humanity had just proved itself on the galactic stage, not through strength of arms or advanced technology, but through their species' most basic trait, the ability to take a hit and keep going. As she took her seat at the High Council table, Sarah couldn't help but think that Earth's first official diplomatic contact with an alien species would make one hell of a story someday. Assuming, of course, they all survived whatever threat had the mighty Zarkak's empire so scared they'd resort to shooting diplomatic envoys. But that was a problem for her after the paperwork was signed. Right now, she had a peace treaty to negotiate, with a slight amendment about proper diplomatic protocols and the inappropriate use of weapons during meetings. The medical bay of the Zarkak's High Council complex was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Living crystal formations pulsed with bioluminescent light, monitoring her vital signs as Dr. Morrison worked alongside a Zarkak's medical specialist named Erie Telephone. The alien doctor's scales shifted between shades of green and blue as she studied the readings. Fascinating, Iritel whispered, all 4 hands moving across different holographic displays. Your cellular structure actually absorbed and redistributed the energy from the counselor's weapon. In any other species we've encountered, the energy would have caused catastrophic cellular breakdown. Sarah winced as Morrison applied a regenerative patch to her chest. Lucky us. Now about this threat you mentioned, High Counselor. Vector stood at the window overlooking the crystalline city below. The 3 suns were setting, casting prismatic shadows across the landscape. We call them the Void Dancers. They emerged from the dark space between galaxy arms 3 cycles ago. At first, we thought they were merely another spacefaring race. The High Counselor's scales darkened to a deep indigo. We were wrong. They're not solid beings like us. They exist as pure energy, capable of inhabiting and consuming any power source they encounter. Our most advanced weapons pass right through them. Worse, they feed on the energy of our attacks, growing stronger. Like the photon-eating bacteria we discovered in the Mariana Trench, Morrison mused, earning surprised looks from both aliens. Life finds a way, even in the darkest places. Show them, Vector commanded, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. Sarah watched in horror as an entire Zarkak city was consumed by what looked like living lightning. The beings moved with terrible purpose, draining power from everything they touched. When armed forces arrived, their energy weapons only made the entities grow larger, more vibrant. 3 colony worlds lost, Vector continued. Millions of my people either dead or... He trailed off, scales rippling with distress. Or what? Sarah pressed, though part of her didn't want to know. Iritel answered, her voice soft. The Void Dancers don't just consume energy. They can possess any being with sufficient bioelectrical activity. The victims become living conduits, their bodies transformed into energy matrices that spawn more dancers. But most species can't survive the transformation. They burn out in seconds. But humans might, Morrison said, studying his medical readings with new intensity. Our nervous systems have unique properties. We can channel and redistribute energy in ways your people can't. That's why the ambassador survived the weapon blast. Sarah's diplomatic training warred with her natural caution. You're not suggesting we volunteer to be possessed by energy beings? No. Vector's scales shifted to a deep red of determination. But your species' natural resilience, combined with our biotechnology, might be the key to fighting them. The weapon that struck you was a test, one we've performed on every species we've encountered. You're the first to survive it. Because you needed to know if we could handle the energy levels the Void Dancers emit, Sarah realized. The shot wasn't just about testing our worth as allies. You were desperately searching for anyone who could fight these things. Yes, Vector admitted. Though the method was regrettable, the results confirm what we'd hoped. Humans might be uniquely suited to wield our most powerful weapons against the Dancers, weapons that would burn out our own people in seconds. Morrison's scanner beeped, drawing everyone's attention. Ambassador, your cells are showing remarkable adaptation to the energy exposure. The burned tissue is regenerating at an accelerated rate, and your body's electrical field has actually grown stronger. It's not just survival. Iritel's scales flickered with excitement. Your biology is learning, evolving in response to the energy. This could change everything. Sarah stood, ignoring Morrison's protests. High Counselor, I need to contact Earth immediately. If these Void Dancers are as dangerous as you say, this goes beyond simple diplomatic relations. We're talking about a threat to all solid matter life forms in the galaxy. Agreed. Vector moved to a communications crystal. But Ambassador, you should know. The Void Dancers are moving faster than we anticipated. Our long-range sensors detected them approaching the Helios sector. They'll reach Earth's region of space within 2 standard cycles. 2 cycles? Morrison looked up from his scanner. How long is that in Earth time? Approximately 6 months, Iritel translated. Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. 6 months to prepare humanity for a threat they'd never imagined. 6 months to figure out how to fight beings of pure energy. 6 months to turn humanity's unique resilience into a weapon. High Counselor, she said, her voice firm. I need everything you have on the Void Dancers, every scrap of data, every failed defense attempt, every theory your scientists have developed. And I need your best biotechnology experts. If we're going to merge human resilience with Zarkak's technology, we need to start now. Vector's scales shifted to a color she hadn't seen before, a brilliant gold that seemed to pulse with inner light. You would still ally with us, after we shot you, after learning the true scale of the threat. Sarah smiled grimly. High Counselor, if there's one thing you should learn about humans, it's this. We're at our best when things look impossible. You tested us with that shot. Now let us show you what humanity can really do when we put our minds to it. As the communication crystals hummed to life, preparing to send humanity's most important message since the discovery of alien life, Sarah couldn't help but think that surviving being shot was going to be the easiest part of her day. The real test was just beginning. And this time, the fate of 2 species, maybe the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Morrison caught her eye, reading her expression. We're really doing this. Volunteering humanity to fight energy beings from dark space. Got a better idea? Nope, he grinned, already pulling up more medical data. Just making sure we're all on the same page of crazy. You know they're going to want to study how you survived that shot. Probably run more tests. Let them, Sarah said, watching Vector prepare the data transfer. Every test they run brings us closer to understanding our own potential. And right now, we need every advantage we can get. The suns had fully set now, leaving the crystal city glowing with its own inner light, somewhere out there in the darkness between stars. The void dancers were coming, but they were about to learn what every other threat to humanity had discovered throughout history. You can shoot a human, but as long as they can stand, they'll keep fighting. 3 months after the shooting incident, the joint human Zarkax research facility hummed with activity. Deep beneath the crystalline spires of the capital city, Sarah watched through reinforced observation windows as the latest test began. Dr. Morrison stood in the testing chamber, his body covered in a web of living crystal that pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. Neural interface at 60% synchronization, Iritel announced, her scales shifting through shades of concentration. Preparing energy injection at minimum threshold. Sarah gripped the console, her own chest tingling where the weapon had struck her months ago. Since that day, 20 other human volunteers had come forward, each showing varying degrees of the same resilience she demonstrated, but none had achieved full synchronization with the Zarkax biotechnology. James, she spoke into the comm, you don't have to do this. We have other volunteers. Morrison's laugh crackled through the speakers, and missed the chance to make scientific history. Not a chance. Besides, someone needs to understand this from a researcher's perspective. The chamber hummed as energy began to flow through the crystal web. Morrison's vital signs spiked, but held steady. His skin took on a faint luminescent sheen, similar to the Zarkax's scales. Neural sync rising to 70%, Iritel reported. Beginning second phase energy integration. That's when everything went wrong. Morrison's scream cut through the facility's comm system. The crystal web flared brilliant white, and warning alerts blared across every monitor. But instead of burning out like previous failed attempts, the crystals began growing, spreading across Morrison's skin like living frost. Shut it down, Sarah ordered, but Iritel's scales had gone stark white with horror. The crystals, they're responding to his neural patterns. They're adapting faster than our safety protocols can compensate. Through the window, Morrison had fallen to his knees, but he held up a hand to stop the emergency teams from entering. The crystals now covered most of his body, and his eyes. His eyes glowed with the same bioluminescence as the Zarkax technology. Wait, his voice was strained but clear. Something's happening. I can feel everything. The crystal network, the facility's power grid, the very electrons in the air. He stood, movements unnaturally smooth. It's beautiful. High Counselor Vector burst into the observation room, his scales dark with concern. The city's power grid is experiencing fluctuations. Whatever's happening in there is affecting our entire infrastructure. Sarah watched as Morrison raised his hand, and the facility's lights flickered in response. James, talk to me. What are you experiencing? It's like becoming something more than human, he said, wonder and fear mixing in his voice. The crystals aren't just an interface anymore. They're becoming part of me, changing me at a cellular level. I think this is what the void dancers feel like. The observation room fell silent. Vector moved closer to the window, all 4 hands pressed against the transparent barrier. Impossible. No organic being has ever successfully integrated with our technology to this degree. Unless, Iritel's scales rippled with realization. That was the missing piece all along. The void dancers don't just possess energy systems, they transform them. We've been trying to create an interface when we should have been facilitating a transformation. Morrison nodded, the movement sending cascades of light through his crystalline shell. The human nervous system's adaptability is the key. We don't just resist the energy like your people do. We learn from it, change with it. He paused, face contorting. But there's a cost. I can feel it trying to overwrite what I am, who I am. The power, it wants to think for itself. Sarah felt her old wound pulse in sympathy. Fight it, James. Remember who you are. I'm trying, but it's like holding back a tsunami with my bare hands. Sweat beaded on what little human skin remained visible. The crystal network, it's not just transmitting energy, it's transmitting consciousness. I can feel the echoes of the researchers before me, the failed attempts. He screamed again, dropping to one knee. The facility's power grid surged dangerously. Neural patterns destabilizing. Iritel reported, her scales nearly white with stress. The crystal integration is accelerating beyond safe parameters. James. Sarah pressed against the window. Focus on my voice. Remember why we're doing this. The void dancers are coming, and we need to understand how to fight them. But not at the cost of losing ourselves. Morrison's head snapped up, his crystalline eyes meeting hers. For a moment, she saw something ancient and alien in that gaze, something that had nothing to do with the Zarkak's technology. Then he blinked, and humanity flooded back. I understand now, he whispered. The void dancers, they weren't always energy beings. They were like us, once. Organic life that tried to transcend its limitations, but they went too far, lost their connection to their original forms. The power consumed them, transformed them into what they are now. And now they want to transform everything else. Vector concluded, his scales darkening with dread, to remake all life in their image. Morrison nodded, then groaned as another wave of energy pulsed through him. The crystals, I can't hold them back much longer, but I've learned what we need to know. His voice grew urgent. The key isn't in fighting the transformation, it's in controlling it. Maintaining our humanity while accepting the change. We need. His words cut off as he collapsed, the crystal web finally going dark. Emergency teams rushed in as Sarah pressed her palm against the observation window, watching her friend's still form being loaded onto a medical transport. Did we just make a terrible mistake? She asked quietly. Vector's scales shifted to a deep, thoughtful purple. No, Ambassador. We made progress. Terrible, necessary progress. Your friend survived longer than any being we've ever tested, and more importantly, he maintained his consciousness through the transformation. He proved it's possible. But at what cost? Sarah turned to face the High Counselor. We're talking about fundamentally changing what it means to be human. Perhaps, Iritel interjected, her scales showing bands of hope among the concern. That's exactly what we need to do. The void dancers are coming. They'll try to change us by force. Maybe our only choice is to change on our own terms first. Sarah touched her chest, where the weapon had struck her months ago. The scar had faded, but sometimes she swore she could feel it pulse with remembered energy. Then we need to find a way to do it safely, because I won't sacrifice what makes us human just to save humanity. As the emergency teams rushed Morrison to the medical bay, the facility's lights still flickering with residual energy, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just glimpsed the future of both their species. The question was, would it be a future they could live with, or would they lose themselves in the process of trying to save everyone else? The alert came at midnight, station time. Sarah burst into the command center of the Joint Defense Station, Horizon, to find Dr. Morrison already there, his partially crystallized form casting prismatic shadows on the walls. In the months since his transformation, he'd learned to control the crystal growth, keeping it to roughly 40% of his body. The rest of the human volunteers had followed similar protocols, walking the razor's edge between power and humanity. They're here, he said without preamble, his crystalline eyes fixed on the main display. 3 void dancer vessels just dropped out of dark space at the edge of the Helios system. The tactical display showed 3 points of riding energy, each larger than a Zarkak's capital ship. They moved with unsettling fluidity, more like living lightning than spacecraft. Alert status across all stations, Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. Launch the defense fleet. Get me High Counselor Vector. The crystalline communication array pulsed, and Vector's image appeared, his scales a deep storm gray of battle readiness. "We've detected them, Ambassador. The Zarkak's fleet is moving to support your position. But remember, conventional weapons will only make them stronger." "That's why we're here," Morrison said, flexing his crystalline hand. Around the station, 30 other partially transformed humans moved to their positions, each connected to the station's power grid through their biological crystal interfaces. Sarah touched the scar on her chest, now embedded with a small crystal node that linked her to the defense network. "Time to see if our crazy plan works. All units, prepare for contact." The Void Dancers moved faster than any natural phenomenon, crossing the distance to the defense line in minutes. As they approached, Sarah could finally see their true form. Masses of living energy that twisted into shapes that hurt her eyes to look at, leaving afterimages of impossible geometries burning in her mind. "They're broadcasting," the communication officer announced, her own crystal implants glowing brighter. I think it's a message." The sound that filled the command center wasn't language as any of them understood it. It was pure energy translated into waves that made Sarah's crystal node vibrate painfully. But somehow, she understood. "Join US EVOLVTYNCEND flesh BCOM infinite." "Well, that's not creepy at all," Morrison muttered, but Sarah could see the crystal portions of his body resonating with the signal. All around the command center, the transformed humans struggled against the pull of that alien song. "Stop fighting it," Sarah ordered, an idea forming. "Listen to it, but don't let it consume you. Remember what we learned: control, not resistance." She closed her eyes, letting the energy flow through her node. The song of the Void Dancers was beautiful in its way, a promise of power beyond imagining, of existence without limits. But within that song, she heard something else: loneliness, an ancient, aching need to share their transformation with others. "They're not just trying to convert us," she realized. "They're trying to save us in their own way. They think they've found the next step in evolution, and they want to share it." "Well, they could have sent a fruit basket instead," Morrison grunted, but his expression showed understanding. "Everyone, prepare for Phase 1. Let's show them humanity's version of evolution." The transformed humans linked their crystal networks, creating a web of controlled energy that encompassed the defense station. The Void Dancers paused their advance, perhaps sensing something different about these prey. "Now," Sarah commanded. 31 humans, their bodies partially crystallized and humming with controlled power, reached out through their network. Not to attack, but to communicate. They broadcast their own song, one of balance between flesh and energy, of transformation without loss of self. The Void Dancers recoiled, their energy forms fluctuating wildly. Their response came harder this time, hammering against Sarah's consciousness. "Impossible flesh is WEAKNESS, Transcendency NDNC, REQYRE's sacrifice." "You're wrong," Sarah projected back, feeling the other's amplify her message. "Humanity's strength isn't in transcending our flesh. It's in adapting while remaining true to ourselves. We can change without losing who we are." The largest Void Dancer entity surged forward, its energy form colliding with the station's shields. But instead of draining them, it found its power redirected through the crystal network, filtered and channeled by human minds that refused to be overwhelmed. "Their attack pattern is shifting," Morrison reported, his crystalline components flaring with absorbed energy. "They're trying to overload us individually now. They've never encountered prey that could fight back like this." Sarah felt the pressure increase, like standing in a storm of pure power. Around her, the transformed humans strained to maintain their balance between flesh and crystal, human and energy. Some fell to their knees, others cried out as their crystal components began to grow uncontrollably. "Hold on," she ordered, pushing herself to her limits. "Remember who you are. Remember why we're here." The Void Dancers pressed harder, their song becoming a screech of frustration and confusion. Where their energy touched the crystal network, it found not helpless prey but a new kind of predator, one that could absorb, adapt, and redirect their power. But the cost was mounting. Warning alerts blared as human vital signs began to crash. The crystal components were growing faster now, threatening to consume their hosts entirely. Sarah, Morrison's voice was strained. We can't contain much more. The transformation is accelerating in everyone. If we don't break contact soon. She knew what he meant. They were approaching the point of no return, where the crystal transformation would become irreversible. They might win this battle but lose their humanity in the process. Yet the Void Dancers hadn't retreated. They seemed almost fascinated now, their attacks becoming more like probes, testing this new form of life they'd encountered. That's when Sarah understood what they had to do. Change of plans, she announced, her voice carrying through the crystal network. Stop trying to contain the energy. Instead, show them who we are. All of us. Our memories, our emotions, our connections to each other. Everything that makes us human. That much data through the crystal network could burn us out, Morrison warned. Or it could remind them of what they've lost. Sarah countered. Everyone, on my mark, open everything. Don't just fight them. Feel them. The Void Dancers sensed the shift in strategy, their energy forms coiling like serpents about to strike. Sarah took a deep breath, touching her crystal node one last time. Now, the command center of Station Horizon erupted in light as 31 human minds opened themselves completely through the crystal network. Sarah felt her consciousness expand, merging with the others while somehow remaining distinctly herself. Through their shared connection, she experienced everything. Morrison's childhood memory of seeing his first sunset, Lieutenant Chen's last kiss before leaving Earth, Engineer Parker's joy at his daughter's birth. The Void Dancers recoiled from this tsunami of human experience, their energy forms flickering with what might have been confusion. But they didn't retreat. Instead, they pressed closer, their own consciousness brushing against the edges of the human network. And then, unexpectedly, they began to share back. Images and sensations flooded Sarah's mind. Alien worlds under strange suns, the joy of first achieving energy form, the gradual loss of individual identity as their transformation progressed. But beneath it all lay a desperate loneliness, an aching need to connect that had driven them across galaxies, consuming and converting everything in their path. We remember, their collective voice resonated through the crystal network. We were like you once, bound, limited, afraid, not afraid. Sarah projected back, letting them feel her certainty. Different. Complete. Watch. Through the network, she shared humanity's story. Not just their technological achievements, but their connections to each other. The way they grew stronger through bonds rather than consumption. The power they found in remaining individuals while working together. The Void Dancers' energy patterns shifted, becoming more orderly, more focused. Where others FLAD or Fobushit, UADAP, USHKNG but remain. How? Morrison's voice joined Sarah's in the network, his scientific mind translating complex emotions into clear concepts. Because we understand that evolution doesn't mean abandoning what we are. It means building on it. You forgot that when you transformed. You threw away your organic forms completely, losing the balance that made you who you were. The largest Void Dancer entity moved closer, its energy field interacting directly with their crystal network. The sensation was overwhelming, like touching the surface of a star with your bare hand. But the crystal components adapted, channeling the powers safely through their human hosts. Valence, the entity considered. We remember balance. Before, the change consumed us. It's not too late, Sarah offered, feeling the others support her through the network. We've learned to merge organic and energy forms while maintaining our identity. We could help you remember how to do the same. The Void Dancers' collective consciousness roiled with conflict. For millennia, they had known only one path, complete transformation, the abandonment of physical form for pure energy. The idea that there might be another way was simultaneously attractive and terrifying to them. Proof, they demanded. Show us this balance. Sarah nodded to Morrison, who stepped forward. His crystalline components flared as he deliberately initiated a controlled transformation sequence. The crystals grew, covering more of his body, but stopped at precisely 80% integration. Even fully powered, his human consciousness remained clear and distinct. See, he projected. Control. Choice. We can draw on your level of power while remaining ourselves, and we can teach you to remember your original forms, to reclaim the parts of yourselves you lost. The Void Dancer's energy patterns pulsed with something that felt like hope, but there was fear there too, and uncertainty. Dangerous, they warned. Many will resist. Change is pain. Change is always painful, Sarah agreed. But it's better than consuming everything in your path because you're afraid to remember who you were. Better than being alone. The crystal network hummed with possibility as the Void Dancers considered their words. Around the station, the transformed humans held their positions, maintaining the delicate balance between flesh and energy, between individuality and connection. Finally, the Void Dancers responded. Their message carried the weight of a decision that would affect both their species forever. We go'll try. The energy beings began to pull back, their forms becoming more contained, more controlled. As they withdrew, they left behind a gift. Knowledge, encoded in pure energy, of how they had achieved their initial transformation. Not to be copied, but to be understood and improved upon. Heal us, they requested. Teach us balance. In return, we will show the ESTRs. The tension in the command center broke as the immediate threat passed. Sarah felt the crystal network pulse with relief and excitement from the other transformed humans. They had done more than survive. They had found a way forward for both species. High Counselor Vector's image appeared, his scales showing colors of amazement and hope. In all our history, he said, we never imagined such an outcome was possible. You didn't just survive the Void Dancers, you reached them. Sarah smiled, feeling the crystal node in her chest pulse with shared energy. That's the thing about humans, Counselor. We don't just survive. We connect. We understand. And sometimes, understanding is the greatest power of all. Morrison laughed, his crystalline components catching the light. Also, we're really stubborn. Once we figure out something's possible, we don't stop until we make it work. The Void Dancers remained at the edge of the system, waiting. Their once chaotic energy patterns had begun to show signs of structure, of individual variation. The long process of remembering their original nature had already begun. Well, Sarah said, looking at the displays showing the transformed humans, the amazed Zarkax, and the waiting Void Dancers, I guess we've got work to do. 3 species, each with something to teach the others. Should be interesting. Interesting. Morrison raised an eyebrow, crystal fragments catching the light. Ambassador, we're about to help energy beings remember how to have bodies while learning to explore the galaxy in ways no human ever has. That's not interesting. That's revolutionary. Sarah touched her crystal node, feeling the pulse of human consciousness through the network, the distant awareness of the Void Dancers, and the steady support of their Zarkax allies. This wasn't the future any of them had imagined, but maybe that was the point. The greatest achievements often came not from following established paths, but from finding new ways forward together. Revolutionary, she agreed, watching the stars through the station's viewport. But then again, that's what humans do best. We take the impossible and make it look inevitable. Now let's go make some history. The crystal network pulsed with agreement as humanity prepared to take its next step into a future where the line between organic and energy, between self and other, would never be quite the same. They had been shot at and kept coming, had faced transcendent beings and offered them a new path, had found strength not in resistance but in adaptation. In the space between stars, the Void Dancers waited to begin their journey back to themselves. And on Station Horizon, humanity prepared to help them, knowing that every step forward would change both species in ways they could barely imagine. It wasn't the end of the story, it was barely the beginning. But for the first time since the Void Dancers emerged from dark space, it was a beginning full of hope rather than fear. And sometimes, hope was the most powerful transformation of all.